Okay, so now we are going to do question number 3 of the FRQs. And just to remind you, the questions number 3 through 6 are short, and it is suggested that you take 10 minutes for each of these. They're shorter, they're worth less points. However, sometimes you can find some easy points. So make sure you go through all of the questions so that way you can answer any easy points you can grab. So I'm going to put this up. You guys have the opportunity now to pause the video, read this, and while you do so, I am going to either highlight or underline a few important things. Okay. So, an important thing is that saguaro cactuses are a keystone species, and I will highlight or underline some things on the next couple of parts when they're talking about the experiment. But first, we're talking about what is the effect of removing a keystone species. So if you remember, keystone species have a disproportionately large impact on the ecosystem in which they live. So when you remove them, you're going to have either the ecosystem collapse, you could have something like a trophic cascade in the food chain. And remember, with this being a describe question, that means that you need to have a complete sentence with potentially a slightly longer answer. So, removing keystone species. And you can say would cause an immense amount, sorry, my brain goes to big words when it is tired, an immense amount of damage to an ecosystem and could make it collapse. All right, so if we look at the scoring guide for this question, the couple of different answers are that it could reduce the biodiversity or the diversity or the resilience of the ecosystem. Resilience is an important term. That's how resistant an ecosystem is to damage. And another possible answer is that it could cause the ecosystem to collapse. Either of those would be acceptable. A good important thing is to note when you're talking about impacts on ecosystems, you can talk about the impact on biodiversity, and that will also be an important thing to answer. All right, so we are looking now at the experiment. You can pause this so you can reread the question and read part B. I'm going to go through and mark up some important things in the question explanation. So there are native species that they're going to grow. So they're growing them in the presence of different native species, and they're either going to be in non-drought or drought condition. Then they're going to measure the height and the dry weight of the buffel grass. Now we're talking about what is a control group, and if you remember, a control group is going to be without the independent variable. So it helps to identify what the independent variable is. The independent variable is these different native grass species, and you want to compare how the buffel grass is growing. So to do that, you would automatically say, okay, you want to do this without the independent variable, without the native grass species. So you can grow the buffel grass with no native grasses. Or you can say grow it by itself. Either of those would be a good option. All right, let's look at the scoring guide. So you can say only buffel grass or no native plant species. Either of those would earn you the point because, once again, you're saying the control group would not have the independent variable, which was those native grass species. Okay, go ahead and pause the video to read part C. And we are talking about a null hypothesis. A null hypothesis is basically stating there is no relationship between the independent and the dependent variable. So what are we saying is the independent variable? We said it is the different native grass species. So we could say buffalo grass grown with the different native grass species. And we're saying there's not going to be a relationship between the independent variable and the dependent variable. Our dependent variable is what we're measuring, and that's the height and the dry weight. So we can say buffalo grass grown with the different native grass species will show no difference in height and dry weight after 12 weeks. You can also choose to write this in the traditional if-then format. If buffalo grass is grown with different native grass species, then there will be no difference in the height and the dry weight of the buffalo grass measured. So let's look at the scoring guide. The scoring guide says some of the options are there will be no difference or effect on the abundance or the dry weight or the height or the size of the buffalo grass when grown with native plant species. Notice the when grown alone compared with is an optional component because anything in parentheses in the scoring guide is something optional that can be added for clarity. And remember, all of these slashes mean or. So you can say there will be no difference in or effect on the abundance or dry weight or height or size. You could have chosen to put any of those in your null hypothesis. You could have put there will be no difference in the abundance of buffalo grass or the dry weight of buffalo grass in the drought and the non-drought conditions. All right, go ahead and pause the video now to read part D. All right, hopefully you've restarted. So we're talking now about population growth rates of native grasses versus the buffalo grass. So native grasses grow slower, and now we need to say the scientists are claiming that wildfires will increase the abundance of buffalo grass plants, and now we need to justify their claim based on the information. So based on the information, since buffalo grass grows faster, which is what the background information is stating. Since buffalo grass grows faster, sorry, I had to erase some things. So since buffalo grass grows faster, after a wildfire, they will have an advantage over native grasses by using up available resources before native grasses or native grass populations can increase. So that's just one of my possible answers for this. Let's look at the scoring guide. So a couple of things is saying that with fewer native plant species after a wildfire, the buffalo grass will have less competition or no competition. You could choose to put add in there for resources, or you could have put with fewer native plant species after a wildfire, bufflegrass will have more resources for growth, development, reproduction, etc. All right, so that is the end of question 3, which was a much shorter question, so it took a lot less time. Notice even with all of that, we still took only about 10 minutes, which is how much you should be spending on these short questions.